The big nagging question keen analysts of Kenyan politics are asking is, who is financing the Gen Z revolution in Kenya? Who? What exactly is the source of financing? Now, before we even go there, maybe for the sake of most of us, we need to ask another question first. Is the Gen Z movement that has become very huge and is definitely a big threat to the corrupt dictatorial regime of William Ruto, is it even being financed by anybody? Let's answer that question first. And we are going to use clear evidence that we are all seeing, most of the information in the public domain, to answer that question, and to back up whatever answer we come up with. Now, I would beg your patience, and I would also beg your understanding, because when somebody is too emotional about something, learning becomes impossible. Getting new information becomes impossible. And on my Moto Kuliko Pasikumi ya Makaa show today, I am going to say a lot of things that I know will upset many of us, and at a time when many of us are excited and encouraged. My strong advice and recommendation, please don't be upset. Just make an effort to absorb the information and to learn. We are all learning all the time. And the faster you're learning, the better. And the best news of all this information is not going to stop what is happening. In fact, if you look at it from another angle, it is encouraging, because it tells us clearly this thing is not going to be stopped. It is going to run its course right to the end. And at the end of it all, William Samoei Ruto and UDA are going to vacate power. Okay? So, as long as we have that information, don't worry too much about the very shocking things you're about to hear. The first piece of very obvious evidence that actually this thing may be financed and heavily backed is just how organized the Gen Zs are. Now, don't get me wrong. It is possible for people, a small group of people, to sit down somewhere and get organized very quickly, and using the internet inspire others very quickly. That is possible. However, we have seen something here that even many of us older Kenyans do not have. And that is the very impressive way somebody has planned ahead while anticipating exactly what the government is going to do, and being ready there at that place, waiting for the government to do what they have predicted the government is going to do. And there are many examples, but I'll just give you one very compelling one. Okay? Now, those of us who know are aware that our security boys have no other tactic, no other way of stopping protesters except to shoot a few so as to scare many. That has always been the strategy since colonial days. Clearly, the Gen Zs anticipated this, and I'm going to prove it to you. You see, even if you know what they're going to do, it is quite another ballgame catching them at it, because our security boys are usually very careful, and the particular personnel they choose to do this evil work are usually camouflaged. They will be in plain clothes, and therefore to catch them in the act The way one of them was caught in the act yesterday, somebody unfortunately lost their life. A 27-year-old. His name was Rex Kanyike. Very sad. My very deep condolences to his family, his dad and his mom. And I pray to Almighty God that his death was not in vain. To catch them in the act, you would need a lot of information. Indeed, trust me, you would need inside information. Okay? And once you have this information, it is very easy to position yourself. Follow around that individual with your cameras or with your phone and wait for when they will act. Because they will act in a matter of seconds, sometimes split seconds. And if you don't capture their actions in those few seconds, the evidence is gone. You will never be able to prove anything. You will never even be able to prove that it was a policeman. And knowing our propaganda government, they would have easily come out with a narrative that somebody is trying to paint the government in bad light, and therefore they infiltrated the protests and shot somebody so that people are mad at the government. They can easily spread that narrative, and you'll have zero proof to counter what they're saying. And so I hope that that matter is settled. Also in the public domain, we already have information that actually the protesters, some of them, not all of them, some of them were being supplied with transport, fare to get to the CBD at a particular meeting point, prearranged. Now at this juncture, please let us understand something. Major revolutions, major moves against draconian rule throughout history, more often than not, have been financed by somebody, financed by some interests. So this is nothing new, and it does not take away the bravery, the ingenuity, indeed the pure heroism of our Gen Z. It doesn't, not at all. Let me give you time to digest that very uncomfortable information. And meanwhile, let me give you a true story from our past. The second liberation of Kenya, the aborted one, was heavily financed by Western powers, some Western powers. They helped us to liberate our country from the ridiculous, draconian rule of Kanu, and Moi and his stooges. They assisted us. Is there anything wrong with that? And I will give you an example of where it was very obvious. Charity Kaluki Ngilu made history by becoming the first woman in the history of Kenya to vie for the presidency. And that happened in the year 1997. Now, this political party she was running on was called Social Democratic Party. And this party had money. This party was drowning in money. And the man on the ground representing these generous donors was a man we all know. He's still in politics today. Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, who is currently the governor of Kisumu County. And although Ngilu did not win the presidency, she was not even in the top 3. She gave a very good account of herself. Indeed, to date, she is the most credible presidential candidate the Akamba people, the Wakwitu family, have ever produced. Believe it or not, she had a bigger impact than Kalonzo Musyoka later in the year 2007. But even more significant, that campaign of SDP in 1997 was very effective in civil education to the Akamba people. Indeed, I believe that is the year the Akamba people started showing signs of moving from supporting the government, forever supporting the government blindly, into the opposition, thanks to the good work of SDP, financed by a foreign power. Okay? So please don't get so upset. You know, there is a very super fascinating saying of the wise that goes as follows. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Guess where that one comes from? It comes from the Holy Bible. Ecclesiastes 1:18. Please let that sink in. The more knowledge you have, the more inside information you have, the sadder you're going to be. The more sorrow you're going to increase on yourself. So, let's sober up and accept this information while remembering the revolution is on. The march to a better Kenya is on, and it is unstoppable. And so, now let us face our initial question head on. Who is financing this? Yeah? And as usual, let us start with the known facts before we move to the unknown. Yeah? Before we move into the theories and the deductions or conclusions from what we are seeing on the ground. Now, we know that a lot of the funds are being channeled through NGOs, non-governmental organizations, just like it was in 1997 when Charity Kaluki Ngilu became the first female to vie for the presidency of the Republic of Kenya. But having said that, let us appreciate the fact that it is very difficult to pin the source of finances, even if you know the NGOs that have been used. And this is exactly the reason why these invisible financiers use NGOs. But I have been doing my digging around, and I have two suspects for you. Number one is the same people ambao walifanya maneno in West African countries. And I'm afraid I cannot mention them. But I will give you more than enough clues for you to come to the correct conclusion. Where do you get the best hackers in the world? You know, there is a virus protection software that I always complain about in the following way. The problem with this Askari is that he blocks the bad guys, but then also the welcome visitors, the visitors I'm expecting, are also blocked. It is too kali. Okay? Now that's a complete giveaway. Very big clue for you to guess who I am referring to. Wale watu walidonate mbolea kwa wakulima wetu na wakapeana bure, lakini kuna watu wengine walafi waliongeza mawe na wakauzia wakulima ikiwa na mawe. I'm sure now you know. Suspect number 2. And this one will tell me, Chris, get out of here. Yeah, what are you talking about? Impossible. Rubbish. That is a reaction. Suspect number 2 comes from a country we all know very well. The United States of America. I told you that would be a reaction. But hear me out. Now, we need to appreciate the fact that what is going on in that country currently is very confusing. It is extremely confusing. Very difficult to understand what is really going on. Yeah, because something happens somewhere, you say, Allah, you mean even these people are doing this? But let me simplify everything so that it is much easier to grasp and appreciate. You see, in that country right now, there are two forces at war. And one force is good and another one is evil. And one of those forces is for humanity and the other one is anti-humanity. Okay? I'm sure we're good until that point. And one of those forces has been linked to a presidential candidate in the upcoming elections in the US, whom many people think is going to win. Na huyo mtu amejipanga, na huyo mtu ako na watu wake duniani nzima, uamini ama ukose kuamini. Those are the facts. And the reason why that person has gotten involved in a very insignificant country called Kenya, there is a much bigger game at play here. And the bigger game involves that person's war with the other side, because the other side has become very entrenched in Kenya. Please allow me to leave it there, and I'm sure you'll be able to put it all together. Unajua wazungu wamekuwa wakinifuatilia kwa ukaribu sana hizi siku chache ambaye zimepita. Kwa hivyo hata nikijaribu kusema ngwe nitajua ambaye sijui. True story. So please allow me to leave it there. And I need to emphasize, this information should not impact your excitement about the future of Kenya. It should not impact in any way. It should not burst your bubble. Those of us who are dreaming of a brand new, very different Kenya. As it has been prophesied, change is coming to Kenya. But it is not going to come when you expect it. And it is not going to come how you expect it. Overturn, overturn, overturn. Until he who his right it is comes. Viva! Keep the faith. Now very quickly before I go, in my previous video I spoke about Joey's dad, actually his late dad, who has always held on firmly to the belief that his son is completely innocent. Well, I have a very sensitive, actually two very sensitive special reports that reveal who the real killers and the real killer of the late Monica Kimani is highly likely to be. You don't want to miss this crazy information. You know, very early on, shortly after this murder of Monica Kimani that shocked Kenyans, I released some very sensitive information to a limited audience then. I believe this was in 2018, and I was going through that information and I was shocked at the accuracy of that information and how things panned out, because this was before anybody had been charged for the crime. At that time we only had suspects. Nobody had been taken to court yet. And that information tells you very clearly who the real murderer was, and solidifies the theory that Joey was simply framed, a fall guy. And this information names names, both the powers behind it and the person who executed it. Now for the super curious and the people who want to know, about only 20 people tops are making available to them these highly sensitive special reports. Actually there are two of them for only $15 or Kenya shillings 1,999. And therefore if you're interested, in knowing the sad thing that happened to Joey. Yeah. Because it could happen to anybody. You can use the information you see on your screens right now to get your hands on this crazy information. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.